Please welcome John Helliwell. Thank you, chaps. They arranged that themselves. That was good. That was good. Well done. When did you start playing? Was it saxophone first, or clarinet, or
piano for a year, age 9? Gave it up. Done it all. I loved listening to Monty Sunshine play the clarinet in Petit Fleur, which a neighbour introduced me to. So I saved up for 2 years to buy a £15 clarinet and played that for, still play clarinet, but then I got a saxophone when I was about 15.
Right.
And just kind of, I got into modern jazz, and then I was a kind of a jazz snob. And I went to work as a computer programmer in Birmingham, left my hometown of Todmorden. Am I going on too much?
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's great. Keep going.
Left my hometown of Todmorden and went to be a computer programmer in Birmingham, and played on the side, played what I thought was jazz, really. It was probably just some inane twiddlings or whatever. And I went to see Tubby Hayes in Coventry. Tubby was one of my heroes. And in the interval, I wandered out to get a drink, and I heard this strange music coming from downstairs, which I went to explore. And it turned out to be the Graham Bond organisation, with Dick Hextall-Smith on saxophone, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, playing R&B, which I hadn't really sort of gotten into, I heard before. So it was a kind of epiphanous moment. And so I got into sort of that side of things.
So how did you, in terms of bands and eventually ending up in a group like Supertramp, how did then the progression from different bands, or was it a progression, or did it just happen?
How long have we got? Briefly, I went professional with a band called Jugs O'Henry, and we moved from Birmingham to London, and we worked a bit, and then that band finally sort of split up. And I put an advert in the Melody Maker. That was the sort of music paper of the time. Have sax, will travel. Ta-da. And I got this reply from this guy called Alan Bown, who was at the time leading a band called the Alan Bown Set. And it was formed from the remnants of the John Barry Seven. You remember John Barry?
John Barry is the film composer.
He's the film composer.
Right,
yeah, so I joined this band. I did an interview with Alan, an audition, should we say, with Alan. And I went for an interview as a computer programmer in Sweden. And I got both jobs. So I had to choose. And fortunately, I chose to go and play with Alan. And we were earning about £5 a week. It was travelling up and down the country in an Austin J4 van, and it was quite hard, but it was quite an education.
Yeah.
Because up to then, I'd sort of played a bit, and people were very polite to me and nice, and I'd been to grammar school and all this, and I hadn't really suffered. But I really started to suffer when I joined Alan Bown, because they didn't have any compunction in saying you were effing horrible tonight, or you were playing out of tune, or whatever. It was quite a wake-up, so you've got to really try and get better. So I played through from about 65 through till 70-odd with this Alan Bown group. We made several albums, and didn't sort of get completely off the ground. We had a few minor hits.
Right.
And towards the end, it's pertinent this, towards the end of the life of the Alan Bown set, the bass player was Dougie Thompson, who I'll come back to. And in the end, we all left Alan because we got fed up with the direction he was taking, and we tried to make a go of it with a group of our own, which we called Wizard. And it wasn't the Wizard that was run by Roy Wood from The Move. It was our Wizard with only one Z. And but we tried to do, we did one gig, and then the manager of the Alan Bown set took all the equipment away and the van. So we just had no equipment to play on, nowhere to transport it, because he said that the equipment was Alan's. And Alan carried on and did his own thing, and we all had to sort of split up. Whereupon I started to do work in... I played in cabaret clubs with naked girls and strip clubs with even more naked girls. And I also started to get some gigs backing up, visiting American soul singers,
right, okay.
Tamil and Motown people like Jimmy Ruffin, Arthur Connolly, Johnny Johnson. Johnny Johnson and the Bandwagon.
Right. Was that sort of horn section work? Was it reading gigs? Or
That was I started to read a bit then. Yes,
right.
Reading arrangements. It was more or less usually a band just and a trumpet and tenor, something like
right.
that. So we gigged around. Then I went to Germany and worked with this guy called Pete Lancaster, who sounded a bit like Ray Charles, and we had a band that played in American air bases. This was '73, and. While I was out there, I got a call from Dougie Thompson, who had, in the meantime, after he'd done a few different gigs, he'd joined Supertramp from an audition. Apparently, he was the only one they could remember, so he got the gig, apparently. But I'd played with Supertramp, with the Alan Bown set, or the Alan Bown as we became called, or just Bown. We tried to call ourselves, we had to be hip, you know, so it wasn't the Alan Bown set or the Alan Bown. We thought, we'll call ourselves Bown. Yeah, that sounds really trendy and nice. So we went to play in Wales that night, and Wales or Ireland, I'm not sure what accent I'm going to use, but the guy just came out in front of the curtain and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, bin!" So we immediately gave up calling ourselves Bown.
Yeah.
So anyway... Yes, I went along to have a play with the Supertramp as it was then, and after having made 2 albums in the early 70s, they were just trying to reform to make one last effort to make something decent,
right.
Something that they were going to be really proud of, and it was this quintet which became the quintet which made the album Crime of the Century.